start talking.
Norm, right there at the hat is our chair.
It's 11:02, Tim, we can call the order. Big roll call, Dave.
Here.
Robert. Yep. Brent. Here. Everyone else, Steve. John. Norm, I'm present. Bill.
Present.
We'll see Christine. Todd.
Here.
Pete, no one's absent. And Tracy. So the first thing we gotta do is make a motion to approve the minutes. If everybody wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Good. Approval of the financial report.
Motion approved financial report. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, so that brings us down to the public comments. George, or excuse me, Tim just said there was no public comment before the meeting. So that takes us down to, guys have it. See what he's got for us.
Good morning.
Morning, how you got?
I've been going through 3 different phases of potential dredging options here today. We put together, some of you may have seen this, our portfolio of information, who we are as a company. We've actually been in business since 1995. Salmon Lake Services started as a small company based in Clare, trading lakes and ponds. It was called Austin Lake and Pond Service. Bought that small company in 2004. So we have actually been operating as Salmon Lake Services for 20 years. I'm probably guessing many of you may know we treated Lake Isabella for 10 years, 7 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So we're very familiar with your community as it stands. But you know, since 2004, the small company I bought was doing about $100,000 a year in sales. And over the past 20 years, we've grown. Last year, we were about 3.7 million. So we're not a huge company, and nor do we want to be, but we've got a diverse team of members, including our management team. With us today is Matt Novotny. He is our operations manager. Also with us is Eric Largent, he's sales and market development. And I wanted them to be involved in this meeting. Primarily, I'm going to be speaking, but they would both be involved in developing a proposal in terms of management of Lake Isabella. In terms of we've been around for a long time. We do lake and pond management, aquatic herbicide control. We own our own vegetation harvesters. We do fountains. We do aeration systems. We do consulting. We do bacterial augmentation. And we have been doing dredging projects for about a dozen years. We did those type of projects with, I always refer to John Bernard, Alcona Dredge as our dredging partner. And for many years, we did them doing engineering, sales, project management. Obviously, we had a customer base. And then when it actually came down to the actual dredging operations, putting dredges in the water, pipelines, etc., John did that for them. But John just turned 65. And a couple of years ago, he and I started talking, and we didn't have anybody else that we were comfortable doing dredging projects with, like John. And I started having a conversation with him about buying in a third or a half of his company. And the way it ended up turning out was we bought the entirety of the assets and equipment of Alcona Dredge. So with that, we got 2 dredges and about 10,000 foot of pipeline. We saw a huge opportunity in the dredging market in the state. And we actually went out and bought a 3rd dredge out of Wisconsin. So currently we have 3 8-inch W&S hydraulic suction dredges. And today we have about 26,000 feet of pipeline to support dredging operations. So it puts us in a really good position in the state. There is a bunch of large companies that do dredging, but they are very expensive. There's a few small guys you know, a couple guys and a single dredge. They don't have the capabilities we do. And for that reason, we've been very busy. Couple that with, you know, Great Lakes water levels dropping, you know, over since we crested in June of 2020. We have a lot of customers out there panicking on Great Lakes right now. And pushing, we're currently dredging over in Casewell. Right now, we got a multitude of other large projects over there, so. We wanted to, I spoke with Tim about a month ago. You know, and we knew about this Lake Isabella dredging project. We've been talking about it for years with George. So I wanted to come in and talk to you guys about, you know, the potential with thought. You know, potentially looking at doing the whole dredging project as a whole, as opposed to breaking it up over 12 years. I think that's what your millage was set up, is that correct? 12 years, you know, instead of doing little pieces. Give us the opportunity to quote this project as a package. So today we want to go through the right buttons forward.
Yeah, right, sign.
Three things. We're gonna spend a little bit of time going through our Riviera Park proposal. We did that for George, I don't know, a year ago. Put together some preliminary numbers. I think at that time, because recognize that you probably can't do that mechanically. So hydraulic is a natural option for that. I want to talk about our Birch Bay dredging proposal. And then ultimately talk about Lake Isabella and dredging, you know, in the entirety of the project, so. In your packets, you know, in addition, like company profile, plan identification guides, product catalogs. We've included the entirety of the proposal that we did for Riviera Park. Because if I understand the order of importance in the projects around Lake Isabella, I think your priority was Birch Park. And then I believe it was going to Riviera Park. And then maybe after that, it was that southeast basin, in terms of priority. So we put this together, I'm gonna say about a year ago. The detailed proposal is in there. Just some highlights though from it. I'll go through some of the economics and the dollars. You can spend time reading through that. The Lake Isabella dredging plan shows about 6,400 cubic yards currently. When we went through and engineered this dredging project, we came up with about 12,300 cubic yards. So obviously there's some disparity from the original planned cubic yards to our original assessment. So when we look at these projects, we want to come out, we would actually do a bathymetric survey. Lake Isabella has had these done before, using a system called BioBase, where we travel around with a boat. The only thing that we do differently from most people when we're looking at a dredging project is we drive a tighter pattern over the area. We tighten up the transects. So it gives us more accurate bathymetry, depth contour. So we would propose doing that in this area. And then once we have accurate bathymetry and depth contours of the muck and organics in those areas, then we work with you. You tell us if you want a 4-foot water depth there or 5 foot. Of course, we understand that fluctuates with time of the year and water flowing over your dam. But generally, you give us an idea of what type of water depth you want to achieve there. And then we can calculate from that bathymetric map a real cubic yards of removal. And it's worked very well for us in all of the dredging projects that we quote, because we can become much more accurate, trying to approach things, I guess, from a science perspective and more database than, you know, engineering. I mean, when we did that 12,000 cubic yards, I think it was based on average of 5-foot removal. Yeah, well, maybe that's not what it really is. So we come out and propose doing bathymetric surveys, not only for just Riviera Park, but the entirety of the bays, and areas on Lake Isabella that you have a desire to look at a dredging project.
Yeah, Guy. John's got a question.
Yes, sir.
Under your term dredging, that to me means removal. Are we talking about all hydraulic removal or some mechanical and some hydraulic?
Today, I would see a lot of it being hydraulic. But there might be some basins, as one of the slides we're gonna talk about, is of that very question, mechanical versus hydraulic. So, we think, honestly, it'd be a combination. But I think I'll answer that question.
Guy, on a project such as this here, this, when I worked with Polly on this, I calculated it'd be about roughly 14,000 cubic yards. When you go south, that little arm to the south of the island for clean out also. What my question is, when you do a project, especially on moving water, we're required to have a silt fence, isn't that correct?
It will be in a typical permit, yes. There's some things that Eagle puts in permits that, quite honestly, is virtually impossible to do. It kind of like putting a turbidity curtain in the Chippewa River and expecting it to stay there is virtually impossible. So you're right. We're gonna bounce back and forth between Lac Shamrock. They've got a turbidity curtain strung across their dam. You're not gonna get a turbidity, so they've got it all wrapped up, so it's there. And it's all wrapped up with tie on, so water just flowing right under it. But damn it, they installed their turbidity curtain, so they're compliant. So you're right, you know, there's things that we look at in permitting. Some of it is just not physically possible.
Some of
So
it's a
we sort the
requirement
wheat
that
through the
is
chaff
not-
and do the important things. It makes sense?
Yeah.
So the overview of this project, I think the plan spoils there. I don't know, is that a private property owner?
Yes, yes, it is.
That said that they would be amiable to the idea of pumping whatever between 6 and 14,000 cubic yards of material from Riviera Park up to that area. I think we figured, Matt, what we looked at yesterday, it might be in the next slide, it was about 7,000 feet.
It's 8,700 feet.
Yeah, so pumping that far would require a boost pump somewhere in the pipeline, which we have a couple different boost pump options that we own. We're currently using a boost pump, probably one we'd use here over on Lake Shamrock. So, you know, you're dredging down in the proposed white area, running a pipeline up the river, coming into that property. We did a holding cell design just to avoid some trees. You know, and really what we would want to do before we started anything like this project is come out and do a more accurate bathymetric survey, so we can hone in on what that number is in reality. This is again included in your package. Go through real quick, you know, we had set up a mobilization, that's pretty common. Holding cell construction, again, pretty common. You know, we had installation of removal of turbidity curtain. Well, we just said that might be a fake it to make it type of thing, because really, you're not gonna put one in and have it do any good in the river. Utilization of a boost pump. 12,300 cubic yards. I think it's more than 6,000. I think it's less than that. That's usually what we find when we go do these bathymetric surveys. But we can hone in more detail. And then, of course, restoration of the holding cells. So we're gonna pump a bunch of mud and muck and organics into a hole in the ground. We're gonna dig a pond, in essence. We pump to it from the dredge. Typically, we install 3 return water lines that would return clean water to the river via gravity. So after we're all done with that, sometimes those holding cells can take a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on how. Depending on weather and how the drainage is in that area, you're basically relying on this muck and organics to dry up. Through evaporation or seepage down through, that, so I would typically say. Sometimes you can do it in a year, but sometimes it's 2 years, so a couple years later, we wanna come out there, and basically, you're taking and folding the berms of the holding cell that you created. Over that muck and organics, and we're leaving it there, but we try to clean them up, make them look pretty good. Might be a slight elevation in that property, I don't know what that is, could be 3-4 foot. Elevation when you mount that up and cover the organics that were placed in there. So, but a lot of this is budgetary. We definitely want to do some more homework in terms of calculating cubic yards, pipeline, turbidity currents, what makes sense, what doesn't. If this was something, your restoration committee had, a serious interest in moving forward with anytime soon. Questions relevant to that?
Length of time.
From start to finish. Start construction, the holding cell, building out the pipeline. To tearing down the pipeline, removing the dredge, 3 months. Something like that. Just depends on what we find when we get in there and the progress we're making, dredging up river. Yeah, probably in the 3-month time frame.
Laying your pipe, for lack of a better word, floating at or near the surface, so would it impede any other kind of activity in that neck of the woods?
This area, I don't think it's gonna be a big deal because there's not a lot of activity up there, but we've gotten pretty good over the years at managing pipeline in a way to create minimum disturbance to property owners and boaters. We know to keep pipelines tucked along one shore so people can get up and out. If there's a community that the pipeline is gonna pass by, we can drop pipe in certain areas of the pipeline to allow boaters free access to go over it. So it's one of the things we're gonna talk about in the Birch Bay is exactly what we do and how we would have done that for that project. So good question.
And this one specifically, so right where the north end of that dredge area stops, just around that bend, there's a couple docks on the east side there. We can drop it at that point so that they can get in and out of their docks.
That's what I'm saying, it may not be 40 people, but the people that are affected by it are not gonna be.
And if I remember correctly, I was on that east side, as you go up the river, after those few docks, there's really nothing. So we would keep that pipe tucked on that east shoreline as it
The
goes.
east shore until you cross over to get to the west shore.
Correct.
Side is,
Correct.
where it would be weighted.
It would go down again to anybody, the couple houses that are at the very end would be able to go up and down.
Also, that figure you got on there, that's based on the cubic yards you have there. If the cubic yards move around, the figure's gonna move.
Correct. That's correct. And like I said, and typically when we do these, and we actually do that bio-based survey, get more accurate bathymetry, the depth contours, and work with you and say, what do you want, 5 foot? 5 foot of water, maybe you want 6. Maybe you want 10 foot of water up there because you want us to cut it deeper and make in essence, in water in situ silt trap. Maybe you want us, we do that, we've done it twice on Lake 13. Where their inlet stream is and we cut a pocket where you create a settling basin. Or again, an in river or in lake. Where if we take that area and we cut it deeper, we make a place for silt and sediment to deposit instead of flowing down into your lake. And then you just plan to do maintenance dredging at that spot.
When you say you've done it twice, I mean, on 13, you did it once, it filled in, you did it again?
Yep.
And so what time frame?
That one within a couple of years. I mean, it's fast.
There's no issues with Eagle saying this was originally the depth of this location, you can't change that depth.
There's always issues with Eagle.
Well, sure.
But, you know, I can tell you historically, yes, it's allowed.
So if you had a plan saying we're doing this for a sediment trap, they typically would not have an issue with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot
versus the alternative of if you don't do it,
the
then you're gonna put, you know,
Yeah,
want to do a
right.
larger dredge and
Right.
they don't want you to do larger dredges all the time.
I mean, it makes sense, but
See, currently the island acts as a reason it's it.
That's why I filled
It
it,
is a
right?
silt trap
It is a
because
silt trap.
it's an eddy.
Yeah.
That water passes on one side, the velocity keeps it flowing down, well, everything spins out as the water falls out of the water column as it loses the
we've
speed.
got a spot.
And, it's just, you know, and I don't know, I've done a lot of reading on silt traps and, the state was really, used to really push those. But they say light sediment just goes right over it anyway. It'll catch some gravel, maybe some sand, but depends on velocity. And here again, silt traps weren't doing as well as they thought they would.
In a lot of that, you are correct. It depends on the footprint. I mean, ideally, you know, a silt trap would be 100 foot long, 100 foot wide and 400 to 500 foot
400 or
long.
500 feet.
Give it time for resonance and sediment, settling out of silt and sediment there, you know, but, you know, you don't necessarily have that kind of room or that kind of footprint, but they do work. I mean, Lake 13 is filled in, you know, rather rapidly. We've been working with them for the last 3 years, fighting with Eagle. We think we're gonna get an approval this week to move forward with their large scale dredging project. They're at about 50,000 cubic yards. You know, much like they dredged, you know, not us, but another company, Surrey Lake, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So I think we're gonna get that project off of dead center after fighting with Eagle and MMD for 3 years. We think we've got a suitable holding cell site and location they'll be happy with, so. But yeah, I mean, this one, you know, Tim had indicated that you had an interest in talking about it as a proposal we put together. And if we are correct in our assumption that first you wanted to do Birch Bay and then move on to Riviera Park, now's the time to start talking about or vetting that or understand what you guys want in terms of timing or when your plan is. And then how we would, you know, come out and approach this and revise the proposal, you know, to get you guys more accurate numbers. Is there anything else on this one, Matt, Eric?
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
You talked about the survey you do before. And then after you do the dredge, you survey again to determine how much was taken out? Is that how you determine the flies?
We can calculate based on your current depth contours. Biobase is accurate to about 3 inches. I mean, it's not a survey grade that within a centimeter, you know, it's a triple beam sonar system that bounces off the bottom of the lake. And then we take that data and process it through a system called Biobase. You guys have had that done on Lake Isabella. We just do it differently than the typical lakes management one for dredging so that we get better data. So from that data, you know, we know what you're. And then we say, like I said, we want it down to a 5 foot depth contour. Matt has the ability to calculate through Biobase the amount of cubic yards of removal so that we get much more accurate, you know, what it's gonna take. How many cubic yards is it to go to 5 foot? A lot of times what we'll do, how many cubic yards to do that, dredge that area to a 5 foot water depth? Maybe that's 7,000, you know, but if you wanna go to a 6 foot water depth, well, that's 9,000, you know? So we can do that and fluctuate, you know, the yards removed. So yes, there's times when we've gone back and done a bio-based post dredging. But if you tell us you wanted a 6 foot water depth, we cut it to a 6 foot water depth, you approve the job, and we know we're at 6 foot. So, yeah, there's times we have done it, but it's not always necessary post dredging to do another bio-base unless you wanted to utilize it for promotional opportunity within the community, like here's what it was pre-dredging, here's what our depth contours was, here you got another map that shows what it is post dredging, which you could share with your property owners and their populations. So there's some value.
Look good in your profiles too.
Yeah, it always does.
Now, what happens if the dredge head, what if it hits rocks? Because there is some stone up there.
Big rocks, dredges won't move. It's hydraulic suction dredging. So we just work around. I mean, short of mechanical removal of a large stone, I mean, dredges are used to pump silt, muck, organics, sands. Some larger dredges can pump gravel, but you will see, it's in that book. And we're doing silt, light muck, organics, sand, things like that. When we hit, if we hit hard pan, the dredge won't move hard pan, there, you got a cutter head up there, you got a floating dredge, and you're pumping, so. It's not gonna move stones that are 2 inches, it isn't gonna suck them up and pump them through a pipe. So if you're talking about large stones, big rocks, yeah, we just work
Small
around,
stuff.
huh? Depends on how small.
Okay.
Depends on how small.
So if you dig alongside a large rock, it'll actually drop into the hole you just
It
did.
could, yes. It just depends on how we work that cutter head around it, there is an opportunity that. If you dig deep enough next to it, the river might push it in there, what time a road underneath that rock base, yeah.
That's your first road.
That was fine, and they'll help respond, from fish area, help respond.
So the next one we wanted to talk about was Birch Bay dredging project. We decided to quote it to give you guys some basis, some understanding. We never thought we would get it. You guys made the right choice in who you awarded it to. But we quoted it because we wanted to show you guys. Depending on who you're talking to or what you thought, the hydraulic suction dredging is, it can be very expensive. In fact, George and I have been talking about hydraulic versus mechanical removal and dredging for at least 10 years. We quoted this and was very surprised where we came in. We looked at the cross section. You had 4 bids that were mechanical removal and us and Michael's Construction that quoted it hydraulically. And if you guys knew project costs like Michael's Construction, you'd think this is just not feasible hydraulically. When George and I started talking about dredging here, 10 years ago, I told him, do mechanical. When you're during a drawdown, it's gonna be your cheapest option forward. But a lot of things have changed in 10 years, and one of the things that have changed significantly with this project is the magnitude. When George and I were talking 10 years ago, it was, Birch Bay, Birdie Bay, what's the park south of Birch Bay? They were all smaller areas.
Lincoln.
Easily handled by mechanical dredging. But when this project came out, we were looking at things like, this is a big project. The reason that hydraulic suction dredging is done worldwide is because pumping mud and sand is the cheapest way to move material versus trucking, versus mechanical removal and trucking. So, we looked at the size of the project and we thought, let's talk to Lake Isabella. Maybe we could show you a path forward, that would potentially save you money over those 12 years by looking at this project hydraulically as opposed to mechanically. One of the things that they showed me was, first, we were within, 50 grand, 40 grand of your low bid. And then we're gonna break down some of the costs in this project. But when you get to a project like this, you know, we're in the 10,000 cubic yard range, we can be competitive. In fact, we're gonna break it down here in a moment, but, you know, when we look at the costs of that $250,000 bid, really $140,000 was dredging. The other $110,000 was setup, mobilization, holding cell construction. We made a lot of assumptions, you know. I didn't even ask George if it was okay. I just knew there was an old holding cell over there where they park RVs. And I knew they had pumped there before, so we just designed a project based on pumping there. Later found out that wasn't okay. They want to keep it for, you know, parking RVs and campers, you know? But it did it just to paint a picture with the restoration committee. The other thing that's, you know, ferreted out for you is there are companies that have been in business long enough that can get bid bonds and performance bonds, and there are companies that can't. I'm sure you sorted out through this bidding process, which companies could do that, which companies can't. Some of these one-off hydraulic dredging companies, you know, where a single dredge and a couple of guys haven't been in business long enough to do this type of project, or they have the manpower, the staffing, and the equipment to do it. So you can see through that, so. So I kind of mentioned it, and all right, by the time we built the holding cell, I called, Robin Harsh. He's the one that gave me the price of 10 grand to do the, you know, repouring, you know, Harsh excavating. But I mean, 10 grand of that, and you got 40,000 set up a mobilization, holding cell construction, holding cell restoration. But right there, the actual cost of the project, dredging and the pumping of that 10,000 cubic yards was 140 grand. So you start looking at that, you start taking those costs and you amortize them over a much larger project. Again, you'll start to see the picture where hydraulic dredging becomes much more cost effective.
Probably dredging on this lake, as busy it is in the summer. Unless there's a real good plan on how we're gonna be able to move boats around the lake, we can't shut it down for 5 years. Like you.
I agree. I don't think it'd take 3 to 5 years. I think this total project might be a couple years between engineering and permitting and dredging. But that's one of the reasons we wanted to highlight this. When we designed this project, right? We were going to the holding cell that we later found out that you didn't really want to use again over by the LIPOA office. But we looked very closely at pipeline management, right? And how we handle that. So the way we looked at this, and we kind of roughly drew this in this bid, there's not a single property owner in Birch Bay that would have been impacted by our pipeline and the way we would have run it and kept our pipeline out of people's way. You know, so we think about that stuff when we're engineering these projects, you know, and make sure that we're not gonna negatively impact people, or block them in or restrict their access. And we do that for every dredging project that we do. Yeah, we even noted a pipeline not in the way, Birch Plan, dredge plan.
How big does the typical holding cell have to be?
There is no typical holding cell. So we're gonna talk about the similarities between your project and Lake Shamrock. Lake Shamrock, we were pumping 150,000-ish cubic yards. We built the holding cell at the airport. That particular holding cell happens to be about 10 acres in size. So, you know, the one for Riviera Park obviously be much smaller. The containment is much lower. Yeah, in terms of projects. So we build holding cells to suit, you know, the size of the project.
Not only square feet, but how deep you make the holding cell, you know, increasing depends on the cubic yards you're moving, so. So yeah, there is no answer.
Yeah, no,
If you're able to go deep, you have the material to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
We ended up at Lake Shamrock 22 foot internal to the berm. When we built that holding cell, so then we can calculate once we finish that, cubic yards of containment, that type of thing, so. Years ago, I agreed, the mechanical harvesting was probably the best path forward. This is why I need to see the slide in front of me, Matt. He says this all the time, like, I'll start talking, I'll get on a roll, and it's something we handle in the next slide, and it is in fact the case that we did this year. So the things that we're talking about, right, we looked at this 10 years ago, we thought it was a much smaller project. Now with the size of your project, cutter head hydraulic section dredging and pumping this mud to where you want it is going to be your most cost-effective path forward. Not so much when it's smaller project sizes, but, some of the downsides, talk about some of the downsides, of mechanical versus hydraulic.